Super Polygon Grand Prix, or SPGP from now on, is a promising and incredibly self-assured indie arcade racer that you can find on Steam, currently in early access form. It is under very active development with builds pushed out fast and often. Before we get on with it, I need to give you the spiel. This is important information I find incredibly tedious to portray, but it's stuff you need to know. I'll get this out of the way so we can talk about how the game is shaping up. SPGP currently has 4 cars and 20 tracks. Eventually, the plan is to have 20 cars and 48 tracks. There is only an arcade mode right now, which is basically single race. These races can be played on rookie, normal and pro modes, with only the pro mode leaving your race times eligible for online leaderboards. When you first start SPGP, races are divided into groups of 4 and require stars to unlock, which you acquire by completing races. And finally, regional pricing is as you'll find it on the screen. Also, what's that mysterious hypermeter doing over there? We'll find out later on, I guess. SPGP is a heady mix of both Sega's Virtua Racing and Indianapolis 500. It shares elements of VR's Sega Model 1 arcade board aesthetics with some of its gameplay sensibilities too, but it perhaps gives off the Indy 500 vibes when it comes to the sheer pinpoint precision of the gameplay. But to leave it at that comparison would be doing the game a grave injustice. SPGP has ambition that extends much further than the titles that seemingly inspire it. It charts its own course and is on track to perhaps even better what has gone before. That is, if ROG Games can keep up the current momentum. Initial impressions are good, and I was relieved to see that SPGP's AV presentation seems really well thought out. It definitely has its own style, with a cohesive look, sound and feel you don't often see so well executed in an indie racer. There are a couple of caveats I wanted to mention, however. The UI elements, font choices, colours and basic appearance is very simple at the moment. I'm sure it's all placeholder stuff, so I'm not too worried. Secondly, some racetracks could use a little tweaking when it comes to the colour work. Most tracks are fine, but Bounty Run, which is one of my favourite tracks, has some issues. Overall, it looks awesome, but the red rooftops are visually quite loud. Maybe it's just me, but the red colour used screams for attention, and I find it pulling my focus away from the race at large. I hope this is something that might be looked at in the future. When it comes to the music, I dig it. Composed by Matt Javanshire, I find it unique and it really works to give SPGP its own identity. Chock full of catchy melodies. If you're anything like me, they will stick with you for days perhaps, and may drive you a little nuts like it did me. But regardless, it's really good stuff. There's maybe not enough of it to avoid it eventually sounding repetitive, as the loop points are quite small, but it's still early days. It was good enough that I managed to buy the soundtrack off Bandcamp. Sound effects are fitting too. They're a little low in the mix in all of this gameplay, but it's how I roll. I like the music to dominate. Take a listen. But what really matters is that for SPGP, gameplay really is king, and ROG Games nails it hard. Like any arcade racer worth its salt, it's easy to pick up and play. But if you want to master it, then you'll have to learn the courses and get used to each vehicle's nuances. I really love the F1 leanings of the game, but with a bit of that virtual racing skid drifting thrown in there too. Arcade mode also features vehicle damage and pit lanes during races, but the mechanic is a work in progress right now. So it works as you'd expect, but it's quite streamlined in that it doesn't wrestle control away from you or slow a race down too much. The vehicles on offer have their own stats, giving them the usual strengths and weaknesses, but they are all brilliant to drive. Just fantastic across the board when it comes to controls. Steering is tuned perfectly and feels amazing to play with every controller I've thrown at it. I'm looking forward to seeing what future vehicles will be brought to the table, and I'm really hoping that perhaps it'll expand the roster with various types, a little like Virtua Racing Deluxe did with the stock car and prototype makes. But good controls and mechanics are nothing without good tracks to race on, and here again, SPGP just excels. Although clearly inspired by over-the-top arcade greats, SPGP does its own thing here. Tracks are indeed more abundant than you'd find in the average arcade racer, and generally much longer in lap length. If ROS games can keep up the same level of quality in regards to the visuals and design and track layout for the upcoming 28 tracks, then SPGP will have content to keep you coming back for a long, long time. I do have a couple of criticisms though. My first bugbear is that menu navigation can be sluggish. Moving through different menus at speed is difficult because the game doesn't seem to recognize fast inputs back to back in the menus very well. I also find myself yearning for a time trial mode, but I can understand the logic of only allowing single races during this period of the early access phase. And of course, there's still the occasional physics quirks to contend with, especially in regards to collision. But every build of the game seems to improve on this front. And finally, I'd really love to see ROS games implement some kind of canned animation. Again, like Indy 500 and Virtua Racing, when you collide with another car hard enough. It could be punishing enough that it slows you down a bit, and also it could face you back in the right direction so that continuing the race means as little interruption as possible. In the grand scheme of things though, and at this stage of development, these are small quibbles. I have every faith in ROS games to add this layer of polish when the time is right to do so. In the end, ROS Games has shown the rest how it is done, and because of that, SPGP has me pushing the hypermeter up as far as it'll go. The controls and overall gameplay are to die for, and paired with some truly exceptional track design, provide almost 100% of the reason you want to come back and play over and over again. The AV presentation is the icing on the cake, and this amount of content at this stage is super generous. This isn't a wait and see situation with SPGP. I would say just jump in now. Development is active and it nails the feel straight out of the gate in a way that other early access indie racers just haven't quite managed to do. It stands out amongst the new wave of arcade racers, and I cannot recommend Super Polygon Grand Prix enough. If you like this preview and have seen some of my other videos, please consider liking, subscribing, and following me on X. I tend to post updates there too. Alright, you guys take care, and I'll see you in the next video.